Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. I'll be sharing my time with the member for Portneuf, Jacques Cartier, this afternoon. And I want to thank the member for Victoria for putting forward this motion for debate today for a couple of reasons. Firstly, the motion goes to the heart of what we, as the official opposition, are meant to be doing in this House, and that is holding this government to account for the promises that it made to Canadians and identifying promises gone unfulfilled, or breaches of promises made. And this is a government, Mr. Speaker, with such little respect for Canadians and for the truth that there's no shortage of these. In this instance, we're talking about the Prime Minister's promise not to raise taxes and his breach of that promise, a breach repeated by his Finance Minister while tabling the budget, and in turn by his Parliamentary Secretary. Now, Budget 2013, Mr. Speaker, contains almost $8 billion of tax increases on nearly 1,300 types of goods, from hospital parking to bicycles to baby strollers to coffee makers and other goods and services, including MP3 players and iPads. But secondly, the motion invites us to talk about what could be done, what is actually possible if only we had a government with some sense of policy innovation or creativity, if only we had a government with an eye to the future of this country. In fact, if only we had a government that was sufficiently humble to look at what other governments are doing around the world as those governments turn their eyes to the future. So I wanted to take a look this afternoon at just one of the almost 1,300 consumer products that is going to become more expensive because of the tax increases in this budget. And that product is the bike. It is estimated, Mr. Speaker, that the cost to Canadians from this government by increasing the tariff on bicycles from 8 to 13% will be in the range of $5 to $6 million annually. It is, in fact, Mr. Speaker, a $5 to $6 million disincentive to a healthful, active, environmentally friendly form of transportation at precisely the time when cities across this country, including, if not especially my own, Toronto, are struggling enormously with the hugely costly and frustrating combination of traffic congestion and underfunded and consequently overcrowded public transit. When we, as a country, are struggling with a high and growing rate of obesity and chronic diseases related to obesity, when the world is hurtling towards a radically different future owing to greenhouse gas emissions and the consequent climate change, a problem this government refuses to even acknowledge, much less address, Mr. Speaker. So enter the bicycle, the modest bike, as at least part of the solution to these issues. Now, I've spoken many times, Mr. Speaker, in this House about the economic implications of traffic congestion in Toronto. As of 2006, Toronto's traffic congestion was estimated to cost the economy about $6 billion per year in lost productivity. The Toronto Board of Trade has further reported that that cost will increase to $15 billion by 2030 in the absence of some significant change. The members of the Toronto Board of Trade identify the issue as their greatest concern. It is a problem, Mr. Speaker, that ought to be addressed, and quickly. With respect to the issue of health, Mr. Speaker, Toronto Public Health's 2012 report entitled Road to Health, Improving Walking and Cycling in Toronto advises that 70% of Torontonians commute by car. Now, Toronto Public Health further advises that about 55% of all trips in Toronto are less than 7 kilometers and are therefore conducive to cycling. Now, we know that physical activity aids in preventing or ameliorating a number of conditions, including obesity, cardiovascular disease, type 2 diabetes, and cancer. Collectively, improved health leads to lower health care costs, and Toronto Public Health estimates that savings in direct medical costs arising from citizens engaging in active forms of transit, like walking and cycling, for example, would provide a further economic benefit of $110 to $160 million each year in Toronto alone. And to the environmental impact, Mr. Speaker, of Toronto's traffic congestion, that's huge. For every litre of gas burned, approximately 2.4 kilograms of carbon dioxide are released into the atmosphere. That adds up quickly, Mr. Speaker, in a city of nearly 3 million people stuck in traffic. Data from the C40 Cities Climate Leadership Group shows that Toronto emits 29.1 million tons annually of CO2 alone. Of that amount, 35% comes from transportation. Now, it's by no means just a Toronto problem, Mr. Speaker. Countries and cities around the world are confronting the same challenges and making their own unfortunate contributions to climate change. But countries around the world are also recognizing that in the simple, modest bicycle is embedded great opportunities to mitigate these challenges. Excuse me. In part, the response has been one of investing in cycling infrastructure, and Denmark is a prime example. In April of 2012, Denmark opened its new bicycle superhighway to facilitate commutes between Copenhagen and its outer suburbs, the first of 26 such planned routes. It aims to encourage more and more citizens to choose cycling over other methods of travel. The City of London, England, is on a similar path, and about his revolutionary cycling plan for a city, London's mayor said cycling will be treated not as a niche, but what it is, an integral part of the transport network. And London's Transport Commissioner adds, I quote, "This is about much more than routes for cyclists. It is about the huge health and economic benefits that cycling can bring." And it is in part, at least with an eye to the economic benefits, that a number of countries have implemented plans to make cycling, in fact, less expensive. That is the opposite of what this government is doing with Budget 2013. In 2009, for example, Mr. Speaker, Ireland initiated a national Cycle to Work program. This program provides a way for employers and employees to receive tax breaks for getting out of cars and onto bikes as their means for commuting to work. Under the program, the benefit, i.e. the bicycle itself, is not subject to a benefit-in-kind taxation, and employees can save up to 52% of the cost of the bike, while employers save about 11% in pay-related social insurance contributions. The United Kingdom, Germany, Denmark, and cities in other countries have similarly named programs to incent cycling as a form of commuting. Now, a study done by the Irish Bicycle Business Association called the scheme in Ireland a massive success measured against a number of different criteria, including benefits to local economies and, importantly, net revenue benefit to the government, mainly through increases in sales tax revenues from increased bike sales, safety accessory sales and servicing, and income tax revenues from job creation, Mr. Speaker. In conclusion, Mr. Speaker, I noted in a recent column by Lisa Rochon, the architecture critic for the Globe and Mail, about the values of young people living in Toronto, Vancouver, and Calgary. The issue of bike lanes was identified as one of a number of urban features of great importance to the millennial generation and reflective of a new way that they want to live in, own, and experience their urban environments. All of that, Mr. Speaker, escapes this Conservative government, and that it escapes this Conservative government is reflective of a government that is a poor economic manager, that fails to understand or care about cities and how they work, and that is deaf to voices, young and old alike, who want to talk about the future, what it looks like, and what we need to do now to preserve a healthy and prosperous one for coming generations. Some might say, Mr. Speaker, I've made too much of the bicycle here today. It is, after all, just one of about 1,300 consumer goods that will be made more expensive to Canadians under Budget 2013. But the modest bike represents opportunities for economic growth and productivity, along with healthier living, healthier cities, and a healthier planet. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Questions and comments? The Honourable Member for Winnipeg North.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Speaker. I'm wondering if my colleague can provide a comment on what I believe is an important issue, and that is regarding when you put in tariffs, there is another significant impact in terms of increasing the price gap between American retailers versus Canadian retailers, and many Canadians, especially if you live along the border, you will find will travel to go to the United States because they believe, and it's quite factual in many different ways, that the price is so much cheaper in the United States. And at the end of the day, that many of the tariffs that are being put into place will in fact increase that price gap. And I'm wondering if you might want to provide a comment on that.
The honourable member for Beaches East York.
Yeah, I thank my colleague for his question. I grew up in Kingston, Ontario, home of his colleague, member for Kingston and the Islands, and crossing the border was a daily fact of life for folks in Kingston, shopping because of the price gap, even back when I was much younger. And now in Toronto, that American border isn't far away. In fact, Mr. Speaker, it's not far away from the vast majority of Canadians. And Doug Porter, the Bank of Montreal chief economist, had this to say about the tax increases in Budget 2013 that we've been talking about. And I quote, "One wonders if this doesn't potentially lead to even more of a problem on the price gap. I have to wonder if this isn't taking from one hand and piling onto the other, aggravating cross-border shopping." Thanks, Mr. Speaker.